All right. Good afternoon. We are delighted to be joined by our friend Abdallah Al Dardari, who, as you know, is the director of the Regional Bureau for Arab States at the UN Development Program. And he is here he's rather in Amman in Jordan to brief you on the launch of UNDP's report entitled War in Gaza, Expected Socioeconomic Impacts on the State of Palestine. So Abdallah, you have the floor, and then we'll take some questions.
Thank you very much. This is a second joint report, ESCWA UNDP, assessing the socioeconomic impact of the war in Gaza. If you remember, in November 2023, we issued a report indicating the losses in the GDP, in poverty, in unemployment, in human development. And now, after more than 6 months of fighting, we are updating our figures and our projections. And now the new time horizon is up to 9 months of impact. The impact has been increasing in an exponential manner, and therefore, for example, only in GDP had lost already 25% compared to the pre-war projections by 6 months of fighting, and the loss is expected to reach 29% if the fighting continues for 9 months. The same could be established on household consumption and poverty. Household consumption increased by 35% at least. And if the fighting continues for 9 months, the drop in household consumption will reach more than 38%. Poverty rate, which is a staggering poverty rate, has already increased from 38% to 60%, to more than 60% in the first 6 months of the fighting, and expected to increase even further should the fighting continue for 9 months. Unemployment rate in all of the Palestinian territories have increased from 25% before the war to 46% now, and expected and could reach more than 48% if the fighting continues for 9 months. Most importantly, the Human Development Index for Palestine in general, not just for Gaza, for Palestinian territories, East Jerusalem, West Bank, and Gaza, have regressed by 20 years. And for Gaza alone, it has regressed by more than 40 years. We are back in the 80s almost for Gaza. So all the investments in human development in the Palestinian territories in the last 20 years and in Gaza in the last 40 years have been wiped out. We are putting out this report just to highlight that every day, every additional day of fighting is only causing the price and cost of rebuilding Gaza, something we are, as UN, already planning to do and planning to support, and working together as one UN in order to be ready for that moment. This price of rebuilding is increasing also exponentially by every day of fighting. Let me stop here, Stefan, and give the floor back to you.
Thank you very much on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association for doing this briefing. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. A couple of follow-up questions. Could you spell out for us in more graphic detail what the pushback in Gaza to 40 years to what Gaza was like in the 80s means in terms of the loss to people? What's changed, and what are they going to find when this war ends? And secondly, is there even any preliminary estimate of the cost of rebuilding, and is the UN coordinating with countries in the region, other big donors, the private sector? Thank you.
Thank you. Please go ahead, Abdallah.
Shall I answer this one now,
Yes, please. Please. Thank you.
Yes, sure. Thank you very much. When we say Human Development Index regressed by 40 years, we are talking about all the gains in schools, in years of schooling, in educational attainment, in health, expected life expectancy at birth, and GNP per capita having regressed to those levels of the 1980s. I mean, and in our estimate, these are almost an investment of $50 billion lost. That means that the levels of education and literacy will be affected dramatically at the end of this conflict, but more dangerously in our analysis, that the impact of the conflict will stay with us for a long time unless we quickly address temporary schooling, temporary health facilities, psychosocial support to the population, bringing back basic services like water and sanitation and electricity. So the challenge has increased dramatically. The same for the West Bank and East Jerusalem. In a sense, the economic recovery will take a long time and a lot of investments. You asked me about how much in preliminary figure. An early recovery program for 3 years to bring back hundreds of thousands of Palestinians to temporary shelters in their original locations with comprehensive community support will cost between $2 to $3 billion. The overall reconstruction of Gaza today, according to our estimate, will be between $40 to $50 billion at least. That's the challenge we are facing. But the challenge, if I may, is that we have today 37 million tons of debris that needs to be removed, managed, recycled to allow space for those temporary shelters and other structures to be established in order to resume normal life, some sort of normalcy for the Palestinians in Gaza.
Thank you. Anade, then Joe.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Al Dardari. It's Nadi Situma for Al Jazeera English. Lovely to see you. My question is, you spoke about the UN family preparing to rebuild Gaza as a unit, as the one family. And I wanted to ask, what is your office's relationship with the Office of Sigrid Kaag, particularly her mandate for reconstruction? Will there be a representative from UNDP in the office that has been established in Gaza under Sigrid Kaag's mandate?
Thank you very much. In fact, I will not be revealing any secrets if I said that we just finished a long day meeting headed by Sigrid Kaag, Muhannad Hadi, the new RCHC, and 22 UN agencies, the regional directors and the country representatives in the occupied Palestinian territories. And we went through all the preparations by each agency, building a common framework for early recovery, which will prepare for reconstruction. To say today that we have a reconstruction plan is too early, but we are on the verge of developing and finalizing a unified UN early recovery framework that is Palestinian-centered, Palestinian-led, and owned by the Palestinian people. As of our representative in Sigrid Kaag's team, yes, we have a D1 seconded from UNDP to her team.
Thank you. Joe, then Ephraim, then Michelle.
Yeah, Joseph Klein, Canada Free Press. Do you have data on GDP and unemployment going back to 2005 when Israel unilaterally withdrew from Gaza, to compare that to those same metrics before the current war in Gaza and now? Do you have that kind of data, and if so, could you share it with us?
Unfortunately, I was not prepared for this answer, for this question, but if you give me a couple of days, I will share them with you directly.
Good. Thank you. We'll make sure you're in touch. Ephraim, then Michelle.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dardari. It says in the report that the level of destruction in Gaza is such that the required assistance would be on a scale not seen since 1948 in terms of rebuilding public infrastructure, schools, hospitals, and other facilities. Can you please elaborate a little bit on that and this parallelism between 1948 and now? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think just to mention the number of 37 million tons of debris, to compare, in the 2014 war, 51 days of fighting, we had 2.4 million tons of debris. So now we have 37 million tons. 72% of all housing in Gaza has been destroyed, and 9% of all other commercial and other buildings have been destroyed. This is unprecedented. And when we say, even we can say compared to, we haven't seen anything like this since 1945, since Second World War. That intensity in such a short time and the massive scale of destruction.
Thank you. Michelle, then Maggie.
Thanks so much for the briefing. Michelle Nichols with Reuters. There's a line in the report about fiscal disruption and talking about the amount of money that the bank's getting in this deal with Norway to hang on to it. Can you give us any sort of idea of what the cash flow liquidity of the banks is like at the moment in Gaza?
Very good point. So first of all, most, if not all, bank branches in Gaza have been destroyed. And on the overall level of the Palestinian economy, we have hundreds of thousands of staff in the Palestinian Authority who have not been paid for more than 6 months. That means they have been borrowing against the guarantees of their salaries. And in case they don't receive their salaries, the ratio of non-performing loans in the Palestinian banking sector will shoot up, threatening the whole viability of that banking sector. And we are doing our best, again, as UN, as UNDP, to have rapid interventions to ensure that we protect the banking sector from collapse. On the fiscal space, we know that the Palestinian authorities have received 60% less this year from its tax and customs revenues compared to last year. So at the overall level, macro, fiscal, and monetary, the situation is very dire.
So just a quick follow-up. Like just on a very, basic level, like can people get money out of the banks? Is there money to be had? Is there money to be withdrawn?
In Gaza, it's impossible. That's why we are developing digital payment systems. In the West Bank, yes, there's still cash in the banks and they can still withdraw, but people are reaching the limits of what type of credit facilities they can get from the banks. So it's not a question of cash per se, but it's a question of facilities that could be extended to people, and we believe that they are reaching their limits.
Thank you. Maggie?
Hi, it's Margaret Bashir from Voice of America. In November, you told us that you were predicting a 12% GDP loss in 2023. So it came in less at 8.7%, correct? So why do you think that was? It's a significant difference because the war has been very bad by any metric. So how did the GDP kind of do better?
Well, we have to consider that when you work with models and simulations, these things can happen. And now we have much better data from the ground. We have the World Bank, EU, UN interim damage assessment. We can now know much better how much the damage and the GDP impact assessment is. We have a much better understanding of the overall fiscal and macroeconomic impact, and that explains why there is this difference in the numbers. We are looking at the overall order of magnitude of the impact, and therefore we believe, and I believe, the idea is that the impact is exponential. It has not yet reached the diminishing returns low, and the marginal impact is still increasing, unfortunately. That explains why the damage could reach up to, the loss to GDP could reach up to 29% if the fighting continues to 9 months.
Okay,
One
and then,
second, 1 second.
oh, sorry, just another follow-up. In the report, it said there was a 26.7% poverty rate before the war, but I didn't see like really a number of people. I'm just trying to figure out how many more people, as opposed to percentages, are
Yes.
in poverty now. I'm not good at math, I'm sorry.
In fact, I'll provide you that number. I don't know why this number we should have, but we are saying that there's 1.8 million additional people who fell into poverty since the beginning of the war. So the total number of the poor I will share with you immediately after we finish. I'm sorry that it didn't print out in the report.
And that's all Palestine, right? There's no breakout Gaza,
Palestine.
West Bank. Okay. And wait, I think I had
No.
one more. Sorry, I
All
probably have
Palestine.
20 questions, but I have one more. I just want to be sure I ask you. So what you were saying to Michelle about the banks, would you say they're on the brink of collapse then because there's so much debt leveraged and loans?
You
I mean,
know,
if people can't pay
I
them
don't
back,
like
will they
to-
collapse?
If people pay back, no, but don't forget the banking sector depends on the commercial activities, on the overall economic activities. So for example, the construction sector lost 72% of its growth rates in the last 7 months. So the banking sector has been affected very negatively, not just by the individuals withdrawing loans against their salaries, but also against where the tourism sector has stopped. Trading has been affected, construction and other economic and sectors, industry and manufacturing have been badly affected, which leads to an increased number of non-performing loans. I don't like to use the term on the verge of collapse. People's deposits are in the banks, and we need to be careful what we say about those banks.
And you mentioned the construction. So it's the worst performing sector right now, but when the war ends, it could feasibly become the best performing sector because of the reconstruction that's going to be needed. Will that basically fuel the economy once the war stops and provide jobs and I mean, are you looking to that sector to kind of turn things around, I guess?
As part of our early recovery planning, we are already doing all the simulations for the recovery. So which sectors will contribute to the recovery, what positive impact we would have then on GDP growth, on employment, on poverty, and all the other indicators that we presented today. And once we have that integrated formula for recovery, we will be ready to present it as well.
Thank you. Augusta Abdelhamid, then I'll go back to you, Joe.
Thank you, Dr. Dardari. This is Augusta Saraiva with Bloomberg News. So I wanted to go back to that 40 to 50 billion figure that you mentioned for the cost of reconstruction. What kind of conversations are you having about where that money would come from? I know Sigrid Kaag had conversations with Palestinian investors earlier this week, met with the Bank of Palestine, but who else are you targeting at this point?
At the moment, we are focusing on the early recovery phase. While we have rough estimates of the total cost of reconstruction, our main concern is to be ready on any possible day after, to bring in, at least, as I said, the temporary shelters and all the other necessary basic services with them. And in our assessment, this will cost between $2 to $3 billion in the first 3 years. And that is at least what we are doing as UNDP at the moment in resource mobilization. We are focusing on this phase. And then we are receiving very positive responses from all corners.
Thank you. Abdelhamid?
Thank you so much. I hope you hear me well.
Yes.
مرحبا أخي عبد الله تحيات.
أهلا أخي
Can you
عبد
hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
5% of all the people in Gaza had been completely annihilated, either killed, wounded, or buried under the rubble. If you can shed more light on the division of this 5%, that's one thing. The second, could you shed more light about the destruction of all the educational system, the 8 universities and probably more than 170 schools? If you can give us more details about the destruction of the educational system And the last thing about famine, and I don't know where we stand in terms of famine in Gaza now, if you can address that issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We know that a large number of schools and universities have been fully or partially destroyed to the point where we can say that there is no longer an educational system, infrastructure and superstructure in Gaza. The exact numbers are changing every day. That's why we wanted to give orders of magnitude here rather than just give a very specific number on a building or on a structure, because we reached a point where it's pointless to say how much more schools have been destroyed. We practically have very, very little schools to talk about. I was impressed a few days ago to see a school resuming and bringing people back. But we are also thinking already of the psychosocial support that children will need in order to be able to go to school, of any school of some sort. And that's why schooling is an extremely important priority for us, and that will be part of this early recovery phase. And what's the impact? Why, when we measure and say 40 years back on 40 years back receding or regression in the HDI, it is mainly from the number of years of schooling that we have lost already. And unfortunately, the impact of the war will continue even after the ceasefire, because the current situation of schooling means that there could be no schooling for tens of thousands of students even after the war is over. That's why it is a very big priority. Yes, 5% of the population has been either killed or badly wounded, and that's again one of the it's an unprecedented level of casualties in a very short time. Usually, such levels of casualties take years. This is in a very short time.
Thank you. Joe, and then we'll close it out.
Yeah, Joseph Klein again, Canada Free Press. I just want to go back to the data that I requested and that you said you would supply, and just want to refine it. I'm looking actually for the three metrics that you've emphasized. That would be the unemployment rate, the GDP, and the poverty rate. And I'm looking for a comparison of 2005, 2007, when Hamas took control, right before the October 7th attack, before the war began, the current war began, and now. So that's the comparison I would like, if you can give us the data.
I'll send you a table with those metrics and those 4 time points that you mentioned.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for presenting the report. We wish you well, safe travels back to New York, and hopefully next time you'll be here in person.
Thank you very much.
Take care, Abdallah. Bye-bye.